peeps, today I have a pretty special video to entertain you with. I really hope you'll find this interesting, as I wanted to film it for years. Suzuki RF900 and Honda Fireblade in one video being compared as rivals? In my view, that's a true treat to a fan of 90s sports bikes. People sometimes like to compare those two as they were sold at the same time. Well, I'm a long-term owner of RF and I spent some significant time with the Blade, so here is what I filmed and my personal experience with those charming beauties. Why not compare the styling first? It is what we see at first glance, isn't it? Okay, so let's start from the Fireblade, shall we? The 1994 Urban Tiger is very sought after color combo. Just those colors alone sprinkle nostalgia over the bike, but then there is more. I don't even remember how many times people told me that Fireblade looks fast standing still, and I couldn't agree more. Aggressive stance with high rear section, beefy alloy frame which is so nicely exposed, and this unmistakable front fascia that makes the Fireblade stand out from the crowd of superbikes of its time. I can imagine untrained eye confusing ZX9 and ZX6 or GSX-R 750 and 600, but you won't confuse the Fireblade with any other sporty CBR, especially in Urban Tiger livery. What a cracking looking bike! Let's now have a closer look at the RF and its very different bodywork. Right off the bat we see that Suzuki has a less flamboyant paint scheme, with black being dominating color in this particular case. First models presented in 1994 only had two colors to choose from, being either black or red. Later in production time, more colorful paint jobs were available too. Design of the outer shell on the RF is more angular, with sharp lines being more prominent. Very characteristic side vents are a signature trait of this bodywork. Another one-off feature to notice here is the huge rear section with wide lights, often compared to Star Trek Enterprise. Front fascia with trapezoid headlight is very 90s style. Some say it makes the bike look a bit dated, but in my view it looks just excellent. Tell us what you think in the comment section. Before I say anything about my personal impressions concerning handling of those two bikes, let's just establish one important fact. Both bikes are old, and at the time of filming this video, nearly 30 years old. I bring this up to make everybody aware that although very well looked after and maintained, handling characteristics surely wouldn't be as good as when those bikes were brand spanking new. Both still have the original shocks, tires are good, and the front ends saw an oil change about a year before this session. Let's take a look at the Blade first. Right off the bat we can expect lighter handling as the whole bike is lighter. Loaded with fuel and ready to hit the road, CBR weighs about 210 kilos, which is next to nothing, in contrast to RF's 235 kilos. Maneuvering at slow speeds or moving the bike in the garage is noticeably easier with the Honda. Changing directions at higher motorway speeds is easy too, but due to lighter weight, oncoming lorries can unsettle the bike just ever so slightly. It's not a big deal, however, as every light bike will suffer from that to a degree. Broadly speaking, Fireblade is a huge joy to ride fast. The faster you ride it, the better it gets. Suspension has a decent level of adjustability at both ends, so some tailoring to your needs can be done. Brakes with 4-piston calipers at front felt fine even at speed, although I'm fully aware that 21st century brakes with ABS would make it feel rather average. Riding RF is equally enjoyable, but it's a slightly different experience. Difference in weight can be noticed, but it's not a night and day contrast. Extra 25 kilos have been hidden quite smartly by Suzuki's engineers, as bike is surprisingly eager to change directions. The way you feel on RF is also different because Suzuki built it using less radical recipe. Fairings are larger and the cockpit looks more classic style, with gauges resembling those from ZZR 1100. All that makes you feel that you're riding a bigger and heavier bike. Nevertheless, RF can still be taken through its paces on fast roads. High-speed bends are a joy due to good stability. Straight line travel at speeds way beyond motorway speed limits is equally fine. Thanks to 35mm longer wheelbase than in the Fireblade, RF actually holds its direction as good as the Honda when going fast straight ahead. Make no mistake though, longer wheelbase and extra weight makes RF more difficult to ride fast in the corners. I'm not a track rider, but I'm in no doubt that CBR has a big advantage in that environment. Brakes on RF are good and actually very comparable to those from the Blade. At front, 4-piston Nissin calipers do an adequate job and work well. In the past, I also experimented with 6-piston Tokikos from the Busa, but eventually I went back to 4-pots due to easier servicing. Fun fact, Many Hayabusa owners actually put RF900 front calipers on their bikes, so clearly there is no problem here. Final conclusions on the handling then. Well, Fireblade is sharper and easier to change directions on. Brakes are about the same in both bikes, and RF is heavier. Both bikes handle well, but CBR has a little advantage here. Build quality contest can be instantly won by Honda, as its attention to detail in that department is close to legendary. This is not just the case of CBR 900 of course. Honda got us all well accustomed with superb quality welding, thick paint which takes years of lasting with ease, and general quality of fasteners and plastics being top notch. If you were to have a closer inspection of CBR's suspension, shock linkage, fairing screws and other little gizmos under its shell, you would notice quality. CBR 900 was simply more expensive than RF when sold as new, and that's by a fair margin. Build quality is really good here, but it's not just about that. CBR uses higher spec components. Take for instance the frame, which is made of aluminium, suspension offering more adjustability, or beefier 45mm forks. All of the above indicate what we already know, and that is readiness for race. On the flip side, cheap cable actuated clutch system was used, which in my view looks somewhat out of place on a motorcycle of that class. And please spare me of the nonsense of keeping the bike light. Fireblade is already a very light bike, and 1 kg of master cylinder at the bars would not make any difference in performance. RF is a typical Suzuki. It's built on a budget in a smart way. Suzuki did it so many times in their history, and in fact they still keep doing this. Many components on RF900 come directly from GSXR 1100W, and that's a good thing. Entire gearbox, crankcases, water pump, oil pump, brake calipers, and others are taken from the Gixxer. Most fairing panels are shared with Suzuki RF600. With that universal parts inventory, Suzuki managed to keep the price at extremely attractive level. In early models of RF900, paintwork wasn't as flamboyant as in the Honda's lineup, but many say that's a good thing. You see, period correct livery full of garish colors may not age too well, and plain black looks good at any time. Don't get me wrong though, I personally love Urban Tiger colors, but it doesn't have to be everybody's cup of tea. Welds on RF's frame or swing arm don't look as impressive, and fasteners have a little tendency to speckling when exposed to elements. Overall though, no major problems with quality of finish here. Awkward to make comparisons here, as my RF has been modified in terms of engine's internals. Big difference in displacement makes the engine in my RF more torquey. It just pulls stronger, especially at low RPM. Sadly, it also guzzles a lot more fuel. Sometimes I wonder how is it even possible that Fireblade needs that little petrol. It just seems so fuel efficient. I reckon if you rode it slowly, you'd get probably close to 60 miles per gallon on a long run. My RF usually gets in the region of 35 miles per gallon, but I ride it like I stole it. Interestingly though, even stock RF 900 engine feels just a little more grunty than Fireblade's mill. On paper, CBR shows 126 horsepower and RF claims between 130 and 135 depending on literature that you read. In real life, acceleration is very comparable when stock engines are considered. They're both plenty of joy. Just to be completely clear, I don't have a dog in this race. Both bikes were mine and I enjoyed them tremendously. They're both 90s superbikes built even in the same year, being 1994, but I would say they actually target slightly different consumer. RF 900 shows more features of a daily rider, with some basic touring capabilities. Its seat is bigger and a bit more comfortable, wind protection seems a little bit better also, riding position is less radical and with simple modifications of handlebars can be completely painless. Fireblade, for instance, is sporty as sports bikes are. Daily commute or long distance trips can of course be done on Fireblade, but be ready to take some pain. I'm a type of guy who does motorcycle servicing himself, and I found RF to be a little easier to work on. Don't get me wrong again, CBR is not a chore to do maintenance, but it's just a little less faff to work on RF. Parts and consumables are still available for both, well, in most cases, and Facebook forums have tons of support for potential owners. Engine's performance is about the same for unmodified bikes, and handling is a little sharper in Honda Fireblade. Bike's looks and exhaust note is for you to decide, each to their own. Quality of finish looks better on the Honda, but weirdly is the cheaper Suzuki that offers hydraulic clutch. Speaking of the price, it's worth to mention that the same year of CBR 900 will probably cost you about 40% more than RF. If you're considering buying any of them, focus on what you really expect from your bike. If you're a collector or someone who is looking for a track toy, CBR is a better bet. If you're after a little more comfy and equally powerful bike on a wallet-friendly budget, then RF might be a better choice. Tell us what you think in the comment section. Thanks for watching, till next time.